one thing I do want to talk about, Jan, is scheduling. And one thing is you and I have talked over the years, I've heard you say so many times, we need to schedule time in to correct behavior, not feel like that's hijacking the day. Sometimes as a homeschool mom, you'll feel like you spent the whole day on character building pursuits. How do we get our children to work with? How do we deal with selfishness? How do we encourage this one child who's lagging behind or is going through a hard period or is depressed? All of those things, are worthy of our time during the homeschool day.
Amen, sister. I feel like, especially in those early years, and that's when we're least secure, is in those early years a lot of times, because we want to do it right. We want to be diligent, and I think you should be diligent. But just know that that also means being diligent in the training of your children of how to get along and how to correctly care and be kind to one another. So that's as important as the math lesson is, because you got to teach those things early. And so the interruptions felt endless when mine were younger. And, because if you've got two kids, then there's going to be squabbling and bickering. If you've got, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or more, it's going to be a lot. So training them early how to resolve conflict, how to express what they feel and what they think about something, that's important. And to learn how to give an actual apology. And kids, they will fight, and then it'll be over, and they'll go outside and they'll be playing, and it's done. That's what we want, is to learn how to meet conflict head on and let it go and move on.
Hey, Jan, one of the things I love the most about you and Roger is y'all would hold court. So tell us about that experience, because I think that is really meaningful, and it sure made an impact on your kids.
It did make an impact. And like I'm talking about when they were between 4, able to talk well, between 4 and 8, especially, is when this happened. And they called it family court. I didn't call it that, but they did, because I stood as judge, and they had to, they got to express what they felt. And then how kids are. They want to go, woo, woo, they get it, respond quickly and be upset in the other's face. And they had to learn to wait until that person finished. And so my oldest 2 were Caleb and Emily, a boy and a girl. And, Caleb would tend to use physical force, and Emily would be brutal with her words, as girls can be. And yet I'd say, when you said that, how did you feel, Caleb? And Caleb would say, and anyway, we would just go back and forth until they were able to understand what led to the conflict, and to be able to resolve it, and to then understand what they're really apologizing for. And Zan, they said, when they got to college, especially, they would laugh and say they would see friends have a spat, and because they had been forced early on to dissect a conflict back to the origin and realize, oh, when I said this is what you felt, and you responded this way, and they then could see it. They were discerning about conflict, and they would say, I wish I could do that with my friends in college, to say, wait a minute. Now, when she said that, how did that make you feel? And they couldn't do that, of course, but they recognized if people could just be honest about what they felt and say, this is what I heard. Is that what you were saying? This really hurt. When you said that, this is what I felt. And yet, it's just not the way things are done. And yet it was the way it was done in our home, because we had to live together. We couldn't just send them off to school the next morning. We had to sit there. They had to sit there in the same room the rest of the day, So we had to resolve conflicts. And I think it's one of the biggest gifts we give to our children. The thing is I don't know about you, but I have found in my adult life that my daughter has become my counselor many times in a situation like with the daughter-in-laws or something. She understands my children and me. She knows how I'm thinking. She's an amazing counselor to me now. And it's really dear. All of the children have served as that in my own life.
Yes, that
And
is true. That is true. Your kids do become your friends and your counselors. And it was funny. I can't believe you said that. It just brought back this memory. I can remember the first time Ty called me as an adult. I mean, he was out of college and he was working, and I think my dad was sick, and there were several things going on. And he called me up and he said, "Mom, I've just felt this need to pray for you. Tell me what's going on." And he's praying for me over the phone while he's driving between jobs. But it was, it's so sweet. And then you see, like my parents and Joe's parents were all around for the kids when they were homeschooling. Even though Joe's parents really didn't like homeschooling, they still kept the relationship with the kids, which I really appreciated. And they put a lot of time and invested in our kids. And as all four of our parents got older, our kids had become adults, and they visited them and took care of them. And
yes,
you know,
yes.
John became
Because
dad's
they knew
legal
them. They had
Yes,
time to really
yes,
know
that's
those
right.
people.
And so I would say, I was talking to Suzanne Nunn this morning about a project we're working on together. She's the president of Florida, FPEA in Florida, and runs that huge conversation or convention. And I said, Suzanne, what's your one advice to homeschool moms today as they are getting into their new school year? She said, always put the relationships first. Relationships come first. Now, I want to hasten to say, first of all, I want to thank BJU Press Homeschool for being the sponsor of this podcast, being so committed to the homeschooling community through the curriculum they provide that's biblical and educationally robust and geared to learning style, all those things. I appreciate that so much about BJU Press. But they're also very committed to the homeschooling community through the things they sponsor and the events they run, everything they do to me just
They've been
smacks of
invaluable
loving.
here in Louisiana. They have been faithful to support our state organization and the events we run.
And I love them. And I love curriculum. Having said all that, if the relationship comes first and it's foundational, our relationship with our children, our husbands, our relationship, especially with the Lord, then you've got that to build onto as you move into the book work as they get older and older. And to me, it just gives education the most powerful context possible. My mom was a public school teacher, and she would always say, Zan, even though when I started homeschooling in 1984, nobody knew anything about it, including me. But mom said, as a public school teacher, if I understood every child like you understand your children, if I had that permanent record on each one of my children, which is what the teachers used to call a permanent record that passed from teacher to teacher to teacher on each child, she said, I mean, the sky would have been the limit in terms of what I could have accomplished. And so it is the relationship, and you want that relationship to be intact as much as possible when your children leave home. We all
Absolutely. It starts young and it continues on making those conversations and that relationship a priority. But I think the original question you asked me was about a schedule and
yes,
to incorporate time for
yes,
that.
yes.
So with that statement that it is worth taking time out to do training, but that to start off with a typical schedule so kids know what routine. And I like the way that it's often referred to as a loop schedule, that instead of scheduling out every single 15 minutes, that my kids knew that we were going to start with Bible study, and then we would have breakfast, and we did cleanup. And then I like to tackle the hardest things early in the day. And so we would do math and reading. If I had one that was learning to read, which it seems like if you've got several children, there's always someone learning to read. and that we would do that early in the day while the older ones were doing math and some of their grammar stuff like that. So anything that had to do with something that took a good bit of brain power, we would try to do that early in the day, take a recess, and then come back and do a read aloud of some sort. So they got to either play on the floor or do a puzzle or do something while I was reading aloud. I learned early on, I knew from myself that you can listen and do something else. And I still do that when I'm cooking or cleaning or mowing or weeding, anything that I'm doing here at the house. I've always got a book going. So anyway, we would do some read alouds, and in the afternoon I tried to do a unit study that incorporated history and science and geography, that type of thing. We did that in addition to their piano practice and taking care of their animals and all of that stuff we did in the afternoon.
Well, that's the beauty of homeschooling, isn't it? Is that you have plenty of time for your schoolwork, and then there's so much time left over for real life activities.